Alright, so I'm going to get Tito played. This has been it's a game that wasn't well received in its time, and I don't think has particularly gotten a lot of love since then either. It's always been kind of a pleasure for me, though. First of all, it has a very unique system. It's the guerrilla uprisings, and the goal for the partisan player is essentially to occupy locations with high victory point value. They have to, each turn they collect the victory points for areas they occupy, and they have to collect some 500 victory points by the end of the game. For the Axis, largely the goal is to keep areas garrisoned properly, not just so that the partisans can't move in and grab victory points, which is the obvious part, but also each region has a series of values. The first number, the 6 there, is how big the garrison has to be. And if there is an insurrection, that also is reflective of the size of the insurrection. So that's an issue. 6 is a bad number to have. The P indicates it's going to be a partisan that the area is more inclined towards partisans. Basically, there's two sides that the anti-Axis player has. Is the partisans, which are really his own, but he also has Chetniks, not Chindits, and the Chetniks can switch sides back and forth, but largely they operate the same as the regular partisan units. And then the final number in one of these area listings is a subtraction. The higher that number, the better it is for the Axis. When you roll a die for an insurrection, you subtract that number, and that's the multiplier times the lack of garrison requirement of units, and these will be partisan groups, that are created by it. So what I'm saying there, for example, if let's say I only have 3 units garrisoning Bosnia, I'm 3 under. Therefore I have to roll because I'm under. So I roll a die. If I roll a 4, I subtract 1, that's 3. And 3 times the 3 units that I'm missing is 9. 9 new partisan units would appear. That's bad. So that's one side of what the Axis has to do, is they have to garrison these. They also want to limit the number of partisan units on the map. So if partisans are silly enough, and this was something that took a little bit for me to learn, to actually occupy zones without a great deal of strength, the Axis will just go in and squish them. And, you know, the partisans get some victory points, but they're not getting any build-up. So one of the tricks of the game, if you want to say, is that the partisans have to conserve their strength, which means they don't go for a lot of victory points early in the game. They're going for trying to survive. If they don't do that, and if they don't concentrate very heavily on that, and if they end up in areas where, for example, Italian units can play with them, or whatever the situation is, if they end up in areas where the Axis has a lot of troops, they're going to find themselves in trouble. One of the reasons for that is the Axis is allowed, and in this game I drew an 11, a huge chit, but the partisans don't know that, to do anti-guerrilla operations, which allow them to invade hideouts, which they normally can't. Now, so there are special sections in each area. The circles and triangles, the triangles are mountains, and the circles are hideouts. The partisans get victory points and accrue replacements if they're in the mountains, but they can be attacked there. They can hide in the hideouts, where they can't be attacked unless the Axis expends anti-guerrilla operations points, and then they kind of secretly are allowed to deploy into hideouts. The partisans get a chance to run away. This is not a major theater in the war, obviously. So other things have effects on it, and some of that's reflected just by reinforcements that come in, like that big stack of Russian Bulgarians after the Germans get routed. But one of the big effects is the Allied campaigns in North Africa and in Italy, which aren't fixed in the game. There's sort of a random factor to that. They could happen at different times. And that affects basically how long you have the Italians as the Germans. You get some good German units to replace them. But once you lose all those Italians, the game takes a very different flavor if the partisans have enough force to do anything with it. When I first started playing, I usually would lose my partisans too quickly. I'm not sure about the balance of the game. My initial impression was, oh, geez, the partisans can't build up their army. Well, I was playing stupidly. My second impression has been the partisans can't lose. I'm not even sure of that. It doesn't really matter. It's a fun game to play, and you could always balance it if you're interested in that kind of crap. All right.